You ready, sister? Or is it deacons? Okay.
I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Let me tell you, I was alone and idle. I was a sinner too. Then I heard a voice from heaven say there is work to do. So I took the master's hand and I joined the Christian band. Now I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. And I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the battlefield. Well, I lost my flag in battle. The staff is in my hand. I'll take it to Yeshua over in the glory land. And then the sun will shine in this soul of mine. 'Cause I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I am on the battlefield for my Lord. Every day I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Every hour. And I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Now when I met my Savior, I met him with a smile. He healed my wounded spirit and owned me as his child. Around the throne of grace, he appoints my soul a place. 'Cause I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. I am on the battlefield for my Lord. Yes, I am. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. And I promised him that I would serve him till I die. Now I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. One more time. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. Every minute I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. And I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. And one more, my old standard, the anchor holds. Number 4. I have journeyed through the long dark night, out on the open sea. By faith alone, the sight was unknown, and yet his eyes were watching me. The anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I faced the raging seas. The anchor holds in spite of the storm. I've had visions and I've had dreams. I've even held them in my hand. But I never knew that they would slip right through, like they were only grains of sand. The anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I faced the raging seas. The anchor holds in spite of the storm. I have been young, but I am older now, and there has been beauty these eyes have seen, but it wasn't the night through the storms of my life. That's where God proved his love for me. The anchor holds, though the ship's been battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I faced the raging seas. The anchor holds in spite of the storm. Yes, I have fallen on my knees as I face the raging seas. The anchor holds in spite of the storm. Thank you, Lord. Thanks. Okay. Now, we're going to have our sermon brought to us today, and I hope that we have this right. Wait till you get up here to see. It's going to be brought to us by our pastor, our minister, Ray Curtis. That's fine.
Good afternoon, just missed morning. Good afternoon. Hope to be here for, well, we won't be here a super long time. And then there will be a meal after, so kind of get fed twice, one spiritually, one materially. This has always been a challenging season for me. As far as no matter how much you say that, oh, this is easy, even after 30 years or so, completely removing bread from your diet can be a challenge because it pops up in some of the most inopportune times and you realize, oh, I can't do that. And you wind up, I think this is probably out of 30 years, maybe only about the 4th year I did make no mistakes. That's not a good record as far as I'm concerned. That's batting something like .25 or something. That's not good. But maybe as you get older and you realize that you have to become more vigilant with these things, you realize you have to become more serious about it. And then you realize that that's what the real issue is. Because you're doing that to show, this is just a show. It seemed like what it was, I think I was trying harder to get rid of the real sin. And didn't seem to really, I don't say I didn't understand it, it just wasn't that big a deal about the bread. I wasn't saying I was looking for it, it was gonna just or no, it wasn't like that. It was just that it was more important to get the sin out and try to keep it out beyond this. And that's really what this is all about. Because the physical just kind of leads you to the spiritual. That's what it's all about. And that's what has always made this so challenging. But there are other challenges to come. For instance, you notice we have no piano player. Nancy is having her difficulties, and we will continue to pray for her. And I'm sure that everybody has had something happen. I had to kind of wrestle a little bit to get here today. But I won that one. Not saying that that was supposed to happen, but sometimes I think God allows that little bit of a push to see if you're going to push back a little bit and see what's going to happen and see, are you still serious? Are you still vigilant? Are you still willing to do these things? But all of this goes on and on and on, and we think that this is easy after a while. And just when we think it's easy, that's when you find out it's not and things happen. Or some people don't even take it seriously at all. They do what they do and, oh well, I made a mistake, but the little mistakes become the big ones. The physical ones become the spiritual ones. And we have to become a little bit more vigilant and serious about this. We're dealing with a world that has a real lack of faith. We see it more every day. Sad as it is to say, in this age, a lot of them, there is a faith, but it's almost as if they've abandoned it physically. It's just spiritual. Oh, I believe in God. Yes, I believe God is there and God loves me, and no matter what I do, there's the issue. No matter what I do. So I don't have to change. I can come any way I want, and it doesn't really matter. That's not the life that was planned here. But in that abandonment, we've replaced it with, well, let's just say, other things. A quick look around the world makes this very clear to all, except those affected by this illness. And again, it's not a new thing. It's an old affliction. We simply believe it's new because we've not seen it emerge so fully in our lifetimes. We've got people now. I've warned people about this for a long time, that you've got people, you walk into a room now, and you've got people in that room that have never set foot inside of a church building. Don't know how to dress when they do, don't know how to act when they do, and it becomes very abrasive when you rub shoulders with these people, and you have to learn who is the one that has experience. Don't get angry. It makes you think about a few years ago when sometimes we would have homeless people that would come through. And some of the others would get so upset. Why are you feeding them? I said, that's what you're supposed to do to those who are hungry. Well, we are, after all, believers, right? But why can't they go somewhere else? I said, because they came here. And it was so funny, a few weeks ago, all of the people that were making the complaints are now gone, but Gamaliel, you all remember Gamaliel came back a few weeks ago. You do good turns to people, they don't forget it. They don't forget it. And he shows up every once in a while, and I've seen some of the other guys every once in a while, and they remember. But that's a different life, and you don't really know what that life is like until you've lived it. Until you've been without a house, you don't know what it's like to be homeless. So we can all talk about, oh, well, if I was homeless. No, don't say if, as if it could not happen. And don't try to go too far down that road and say, oh, I want to know what that's like. Life is short. Time is long. You might get there. The world is, after all, round. But before I stray too far, you know what happens when a dog goes too far off the paper? It gets messy. But as we emerge in this life, we realize that there have always been those who felt like, I don't have to do that. I'm whoever you are. We believe because we are who we are. God, well, he's here for us, right? So why can't we tell him what to do? No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. But we've always thought that way. We could easily go back to Adam and Eve in the garden. They were afflicted with that malady. Consider Eve's lust for power. Adam's lack of faith coupled with his inability to rein in her lust for power. They both doubted God as a result, and number one, lost faith in each other, and number two, accepted the untested lies of Satan over the unfailing word of Yahweh. As a result, sin came into the world. They missed the mark. Now, you ask people and they say, well, what do you mean, missed the mark? Well, that's really what sin is. It means you missed the mark of God. Well, if you only miss by a little bit, it says, okay, let's use this example. You're an archer. I don't care whether you're using a bow or whether a crossbow. You put the target up. And maybe you want to do this for a circus act, and you want to put a girl there. You put an apple on her head, and you shoot your bow, takes the apple right out, and goes right into the target. Now you hit your target. That's what God wants. But of course, maybe the archer shows up a little tipsy one day. He puts the apple on her head and shoots and hits her in the eye. Now you missed the mark. You get the point? So to speak. You missed the mark. But you hit her dead in the eye, so to speak. That's what I'm saying. And that's what God was saying. That's what he said means when he says you missed the mark. As a result, as I said, sin came into the world. Boiled down to the pot, that's all sin is, missing God's mark. The reasons for sin, however, are very simple, but we don't like to admit to that. Unfortunately, the remedies, however, not so much. The reasons are put before us in every instance. Adam and Eve thought they were missing out on something that Satan was offering them because they thought that God should have given it to them already. When in point of fact, he did plan to give it to them. Matter of fact, it was a promise. He promised eventual rulership of the world and all power equal to his. And that it would be in their hands after they turned to spirit. This promise, or covenant, if you will, was conditional, but based on man's response to God's response. Adam and Eve, before the fall, were to subdue the earth by taking rulership over it, replenishing the earth, and were to refrain from eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, there were true trees there. A lot of people forget that. There was the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. Show you how short-sighted they were. What did they go after? The one that Satan pointed them to. You can know everything. If somebody was going to offer you a choice between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life forever, which one would you go for? Just asking. Just asking. Although you don't know what you would do with all that time and that carnality, but that's how we are. We like more than we can handle. We're just greedy folks. It's just how it is. I'm not talking about y'all. I'm just talking about what I'm talking about. But that's what it was. They didn't fully understand God's full plan. Adam and Eve failed to obey God and died spiritually, although they didn't know it yet. And they lost the rulership of earth to Satan, who has since filled the earth with violence, filled it through this manipulation of man's selfishness, man's greed, man's basic distrust of all that is good. And Satan, with little real effort, didn't really have to work all that hard. He led Korah and Dathan to plant seeds of doubt in the children of Israel, while Moses went up to Sinai to receive the codified law from Yahweh. Aaron gave in just as Adam did, relented to the rebels and directed the construction of the golden calf, which in the minds of the rebellious Israelites was their new pet god. As we will see, this was not the end of their rebelliousness. It is not ended even to this day. There are many truths of God that must be laid out, but the best way to do it is to make God's plan plain. Only problem with that, man's mind, being carnal, is not prepared for the central theme of God's plan. Our minds don't naturally wrap around it because we don't even like to think about forever, because our minds are finite. They have an end. This starts so long, and it ends. This goes for so long, and it ends. The idea of something being endless can be scary if you really sit down and think about it long enough. so we can't really wrap our minds around it. Thus, when we hear it, mentally, we reject it. Even when we say we want it, mentally, we reject it. Because we don't believe it to be possible. But it is possible. Not only is it possible, it is promised. The plan is our subject and title today. God's plan from the beginning. To make permanent what is now temporary. To make permanent what is now temporary. You see, from the dawn of creation, God's ultimate plan is, it's like change of text and tense there to make it real. From the dawn of creation, God's ultimate plan is, normally that would have been, well, his plan was, but he lives in a time-space continuum that we're not ready for yet. There is no was. There is no will be. He said, what is his name? I am. I am. Not I was, I will be, I might be, I think. No, I am. Made it very clear. God's ultimate plan is to create a family, a ruling family, which is in his image, his likeness, and power, will rebuild and populate the universe with even more like beings who will ultimately become part of his ruling family. A rule that will never end. And feature none of the flawed features of man's rule. You see, the fall of Adam and Eve didn't come as a surprise to God, as many believe. Oh, he wasn't ready for that. Oh, he had already figured in all possibilities of problems. Anything that could have happened, there was a backup plan there in place for it. He knew it was going to happen. Why? Because it had already happened. Satan had already rebelled. There's an empty universe out there that proves it. The state of the earth in Genesis 1 proves this. Okay, been out here about 5 minutes. Maybe it's time to drop anchor before it gets too rocky. So we'll drop anchor at Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 2nd verse. And notice the state of the earth in the scripture. Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 2nd verse, where it says, and the earth was without form and void. What? This was the beginning? He made it and messed up? I don't think so. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. In the evening and the morning, see these little cute hints all the way through the book? And the evening and the morning were the first day. Most people think night starts in daytime. No. No, evening begins each day, not daylight. A few things we need to understand along with that. First of all, this is not the beginning of the Bible. It's not the beginning of the story. I don't have time to get into that today in terms of why and how we know this, but this is not the true beginning. The beginning is actually in 1 John. John, not 1 John. John, the 1st chapter, the 1st verse. And you'll see something that makes a little bit more sense as a beginning. John, the 1st chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was God, and the Word was with God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life. And the life was the light of men, and the light shined in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. The darkness being the rebellion of Satan. What we see here in Genesis 1-2 is the result of Satan's initial rebellion against the Godhead, and its resultant tohu and bohu, they called it, or chaos and confusion. God began to nothing in chaos and confusion. Who is, after all, the author of confusion? After all, what is Satan but the author of rebellion and confusion? He rebelled, not fully understanding what was to come, but wanting a bigger part in it, wanting to control it. Still not understanding what the end would be, but I want to run it. I'm the boss. Alexander Haig and It is always interesting to me to watch people wanting to control something while understanding nothing about it and basically unable to control themselves. Yet, God has allowed Satan to influence the world for one reason. Reel out as much rope as you can. If you do it long enough, the person will mummify themselves before they jump up on a chair. And if you're really smart, you won't even have to kick it when they hang. Like I said, God has allowed Satan to influence the world to prove in the chosen time of judgment to all the world where the world's sin and chaos came from. All who have ever lived will, for the first time in their lives, see clearly what God has seen from the beginning. Mankind is incapable of governing man in fairness and honesty. Can't happen. Can't happen. Won't happen. We're so full of bigotry. We're so full of hubris. We're so full of myopic thought. It's all about me. I can't see anything else, as if we got blinders on leading to what we want. Everything else, get out of my way. This is what I want. And you think that this changes with kings, with potentates, with state traps, with kings, with all of those people who run things? No, it doesn't change. It just gets worse. All you got to do is look around the world. We thought, oh wow, we're going to have our first president, and he's going to help everybody. Look at the numbers. Who's he helped? Wall Street. As if they needed help. Certainly don't need help now. They got all our money. And everybody else's. To the tune of almost 90%, where the rest of the world takes the other 10 and tries to figure out what to live on. That's some crazy numbers when you think about it. It's like your neighbor having billions and you have $100 a week. And they come over, hey, come on, let's do this. Sorry, I can't afford it. But do you think they're going to say, well, come on, I can help you out? No. Well, maybe next week you can do it. Never mind. Never mind. But this is how it is. Mankind cannot rule over mankind. Somebody's going to get stepped on. Somebody's going to get destroyed. Somebody's going to, oh, wow, what you hear now. You got to get rid of the useless eaters. There's only so much food to go around. But God knew this. He's observed it in us from the beginning. To go through every instance where he observed it, we take forever. But there are a couple of incidents that stand out and continue to bedevil the rebels. They failed to see the plan of Yahweh clearly and wanted power right then. The rebels always, notice this, rebels always choose leaders of low character to do their dirt for them. You see, once Moses went up Sinai to meet with Yahweh and didn't return after a few days, he told him, I'm going to be gone a little while, I'll be back. I've got to do something. I'll come back with some rules. Maybe he shouldn't have said anything about rules. Somebody got a little upset. After a few days, the rebels began to go after Aaron and Hur. Notice who leads the rebellion after Moses here. Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the first verse. Exodus, the 32nd chapter, the first verse, where it says, "And the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain. And the people gathered themselves to Aaron, and they said to him, 'Up, make us gods, small g, who shall go up before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.'" Oh, yes, you did. He told you before he left. And Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron, and he took them from their hands and fashioned it with an engraving tool, and he made it a molten calf. And they said, "These are your gods, small g, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." And when Aaron saw, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh." Yeah, that's what he said. Not that, don't get me wrong here, not that they were so stupid to think that anything that could be made with hands was really God, or even could have life and breath, or have the power to even move on its own with somebody grabbing it and put it on a table or something. But it served their purposes. Because something that could be made as a symbol and representation of the divine had to be carried by them so that these usurpers could amass power unto themselves. But as usual, their impatience got the better of them, and they sinned openly, assuming no punishment was to come. Exodus, the 32nd chapter. Let's go to this. Let's stay right there. Go to the 6th verse. It's in two different places, but we'll finish it here. Verse 6. "And they rose up early on the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." Now that word "play," for those studying, being the Hebrew H6711. Sahak. Sahak, meaning, well, we won't go through the whole meaning. There's about 8 or 9 here, but the one that is relevant to us here, it says it has a sexual implication. That they began to dance and sing as they were exposed to this sin by the Egyptians in their captivity. They learned of their worship of Apis and ox. And the Israelites, having made what? A golden calf. Well, gee, that's close enough. Let's just do what they did to Apis and ox. We'll have an orgy and we'll eat, and basically what the Egyptians did to these gods of oxen and goats and so forth. They would eat until they were, we've never, at least I hope we've never done this. They eat so much until they begin to puke all over the place. Then they drink until they can't drink anymore. And then after they're good and full and good and drunk, then they look around and see who's next to them. And then an orgy ensues. And this is basically what was going on right here at the foot of Sinai under this golden calf. They cleaned it up a little bit in the movie, if anybody saw the 10 Commandments, and they kind of cleaned it up here in that very cool, subtle way that God has of saying things. What did he say? They sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. However, after all of this lewdness and uncleanness in every sense of the word, committing fornication as in the worship of Egyptian gods, this got Yahweh's attention pretty fast. Verse 7. And Yahweh said to Moses, go, get down for your people. I always liked that. Once they, just like, how many, any of you parents got kids out there? And Rashida would do something, and I'm like, saying, go get your daughter, okay? Go get your daughter. That's the same thing here. Get down for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt are corrupted. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf and have worshipped it and have sacrificed to it and said, these are your gods, O Israel, small g, who have brought you out of the land of Egypt. They couldn't have brought you 5 feet, please. And Yahweh said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Who told you? And now, please leave me alone, so that my wrath may become hot against them, and so that I may consume them. And I will make of you a great nation. And Moses prayed to Yahweh his God and said, Yahweh, why does your wrath become hot against your people when you have brought them forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a great hand? Ready again to destroy the Israelites, Moses calmed Yahweh down and convinced him not to destroy the Israelites for their sin. The sin, however, continued until even Moses became so frustrated with them that he was banned from the promised land himself for his own anger. Notice what happened here in Numbers, the 20th chapter, the 6th verse. People can get to that point where they're so determined to do what they want to do when they say they know what's right. You got to remember, when they first came out, the first thing they did was they all stood up and said, all that you say we will do, we will do. So does Moses allow, hey, let's party, let's have the calf. Boom, just like that. Numbers, the 20th chapter, the 6th verse. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they fell upon their faces. And the glory of Yahweh appeared to them. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod and gather the assembly, and you and Aaron your brother, and speak to the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth water. What they were doing, they were whining about water again. We don't have enough water. Where's the water? Bring us water. We want water. And you shall bring forth them water out of the rock. So you shall give the congregation and their animals drink. And Moses took the rod from before Yahweh as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock. And he said to them, hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he struck the rock twice. And the water came out plentifully, and the congregation and their animals drank. And Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to sanctify me in the eyes of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. Now, a closer examination here reveals an offense that in other cases would have been punishable by death right away, but Yahweh was actually being merciful in letting Moses live as long as he did. First of all, Yahweh didn't tell him to hit the rock. He told Moses to speak to the rock. Yet Moses struck the rock with his staff not once, twice. Why strike the rock when he was told to strike it? I mean, when he's told to speak to it. The answer might lie in an event where Moses had performed this feat previously at Yahweh's command. At Horeb, these children of Israel had complained so bitterly to Moses about the need for water that at one point they were thinking about stoning him. Let's go to Exodus, the 17th chapter, the first verse. Exodus, the 17th chapter, the first verse. I remember the first time I saw this, I'm thinking, wow, this was something. But I didn't put it all together. Then these things come to you bit by bit, here by here, there, a little bit there. It doesn't come all at once. This is a lifetime thing here. Don't think, oh, next week I'll have it all. No. Exodus, the 17th chapter, the first verse, where it says, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin, and after their journey, according to the command of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. And the people wrangled with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said to them, why do you wrangle with me? Why do you tempt Yahweh? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, why is this that you brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our sons and cattle with thirst? And Moses cried to Yahweh, saying, what shall I do to this people? They are almost ready to stone me. And Yahweh said to Moses, go on in front of the people and take with you the elders of Israel, and take your rod with you, which you struck the river, in your hand, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there upon the rock in Horeb, and when you smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, so that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called to the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the wrangling of the sons of Israel, and because they tempted Yahweh, saying, is Yahweh among us or not? What? You see, this is the time where it is said that the people did chide with Moses, and they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Moses was not, he was told to strike the rock, which he did as commanded, and the rock brought forth water. So by the time Moses got to Kadesh, he had already seen that if he struck a rock with his staff, water would come out of it. It had already happened once before. He struck the Red Sea, and what happened? It split in two, and they walked through it. So they knew that there was a connection between this rod and water. His confidence in the past striking may have led to him to strike the rock, doubting that his words would bring forth water. For his disobedience, Moses was barred from entry into the promised land. But his frustration was constantly brought forth by the Israelites. They wanted their way, and they had no trust in Yahweh, yet he was there with them the whole time. If they had their way, talk about not seeing the beginning from the end. They were the type that would get halfway across the river and say, we can't make it, and turn around and go back. If anybody's heard that old joke, you just did it, you just chose not to finish. If you can get halfway out, you can get the other way across. But what do? Oh no, we can't make it, and go back. So that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to go back into paganism and slavery in Egypt rather than follow through the plan of Elohim. They preferred the rigor of slavery and the rich food of Egypt and the orgies and the drinking and all that, but they wanted to go back. They wanted to go back temporarily to the freedom offered by slavery as opposed to the freedom of God. Few have seen the plan of God in its fullness. We in this day have an advantage that few have had throughout history. We've seen the mistakes of the Israelites. We've had the Bible to read and have been given an earnest of the Holy Spirit from which to learn more deeply of God's truth through this Bible in a way that no other generation has. We have every kind of help. Some of them aren't so helpful, but they do keep you in a certain place, keep you going. And we know more about the whole plan than any other set of believers throughout time. Yet, many of us, and I'm not necessarily talking about us in this room, but just generally, have abused this privilege as ruthlessly as the Israelites did in his presence. They had leaders who knew their pain. How many of you have bosses that started off at the beginning and they understand what you're dealing? No, in most places now, you hire somebody for that position that had never done it before. They don't know what you're going through. God gave them leaders that rose up through their ranks and knew every problem that they could have possibly encountered. When he was giving them something, he was giving them truth that they knew from their own lives. Moses started as a king in Egypt, put himself back among the slaves. And by the time he came back up, he knew everything they were going through, from top to bottom. Yet, they didn't trust him because there were all these within them, Korah and Dathan and so forth, who wanted power for themselves. And they were more than willing to step over God and Moses to get it. But the thing is, God was right there the whole time. A cloud by day, fire by night. They could look up and see him at any time, or at least those symbols that let them know he was there. They were constantly being helped. They were constantly healed. They were freed from Egyptian slavery by Yahweh. Yet they rebelled. They argued, murmured in their tents about any discomfort. And once they made it into the promised land, they demanded a king. Sinned further and were scattered through the earth. And as a last slap, rejected Yeshua as their Messiah. With as much proof as they had of his messiahship, how could they do that? But the leaders didn't see the permanence in Yeshua. Why? Because he caused them too much trouble with the Roman government. They had a cozy little relationship with the Romans. They had no faith in a life after this one because they were doing okay here. When you're doing okay here, you don't really think about the next one. You kind of hope this one goes a little longer. That's why you see so many people running along the lakefront, riding their bikes, in the gym, sweating and trying, because they want to wring as much out of this life as they can, because we don't know what's going to happen after this. Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do, if you believe, if you have faith. But the Jewish leadership had a sweet deal as leaders, or so they thought, right there in Caesar's Rome, as what they call them, when you're not really the king, but you're just kind of you're not really the boss, you're just kind of they call it a straw boss. You're not really the boss, but the other people who enslave you give you just enough power to keep you watching the other slaves. You know, that's kind of what they were. That's what the Pharisees were, the Sadducees, the scribes, the high priest, who Rome changed out every year. They knew who Yeshua was. Their own prophecies declared his coming and how he would come. It was amazing. On one day, I think it was Yeshua came in on a donkey from the east. The Roman generals came in with an army from the west, and the people were scared to death. But as scared as they were, when Christ came in on that donkey, they threw down and said, yes, this is our king. Oh, that scared them. But it didn't scare them because of what was to come. It was because they thought that there would be no more coming. Understand, they had no Mark 11th chapter, the first verse. Back in those days, all they had was Zechariah, the 9th chapter, the 9th verse. So we'll go back there and see if you see here what they saw here. Zechariah, the 9th chapter, the 9th verse. Where it says, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. And as for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, what? That's kind of direct. I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double. As I said, there was no Mark 11:1 at that time. So Zechariah 9 prophesied the coming of Messiah on a colt. The Pharisees knew who he was. All Pharisees had, I don't know if you all know this, but in order to become a Pharisee, you had to first memorize the entire Torah. How many of us would still be able to stay here if we could stay in the church if we memorized the entire Bible? I know I'd have to be. And I got a feeling I wouldn't be by myself. But this was one of the qualifications. In order to become a Pharisee, you had to have the Torah memorized. So to say that they had not heard Zechariah is a little bit of a stretch. They knew what this prophecy said, but they also knew what a tenuous position they sat in with Rome. Rome allowed no sedition or revolt in their territories. All seditionists and troublemakers were to be killed. And how? Hung on a tree. Having come at a time when the Romans were particularly wary of revolt because of a certain person, you all know him. He was robbing and beating Roman soldiers on the road with his band of thieves, a certain Yeshua Barabbas. All public officials were on the edge, fearing that Caesar was getting tired of this and something was about to happen. They feared some action by the Roman centurions, especially after on the same day that Christ came in on a colt, the centurions came in on stallions with their spears. They knew something was about to happen. We better do something. This man is endangering our political position. The Pharisees called immediately to make a decision. Yeshua, because of his teachings and the miracles he performed, was gaining popularity among the people, but was losing it among the Jewish leadership. A decision had to be made, and they made it. Here in John, the 11th chapter, the 48th verse. John, the 11th chapter, the 48th verse, where it says, if you let him alone this way, all will believe on him. And the Romans will come and take away, notice the wording here, Notice how when they sinned, Christ said, your people. What did they say? They pulled it in. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. And one of them, Caiaphas, being the high priest of that year, said to them, you do not know anything at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish. And he did not speak this of himself, of course not, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yeshua should die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also that he should gather in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day they took counsel that they might kill him. Therefore Yeshua walked no more openly among the Jews, but he went away from there to a country near wilderness in a place called what? Same thing from Zechariah 9. Ephraim. And continued there with his disciples. And the Jews' Passover was near. Amazing how after all these years they allow these little mistakes to remain there. It was not the Jews' Passover, it was God's Passover and the days of unleavened bread. They've now combined it all together over an 8 days deal, and they just let these things go on because no one corrects them yet. And many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover in order to purify themselves. They sought Yeshua and spoke with one another as they stood in the temple. What does it seem to you that he will not at all come to the feast? They're trying to figure out, wow, we got to get him before this feast. We got to get him now. Somebody got to go out there and find him. 57, all the chief priests and the Pharisees had given commands to their people that if anyone knew where he was, he should make it known so that they might seize him. Here is the Jewish religious leadership plotting the murder of their Messiah, not realizing that Christ's mission was not to lead Israel against Rome. That's what they wanted. This would have satisfied their leadership because they were, while they were straw bosses, they were chafing under Roman rule. But they were double bound as they're allowed to make unlimited funding and conduct all the business they want in the temple, which was the biggest perk that they had. They could sell doves for sacrifices in the temple. The money changers came in, so they were doing a full money exchange thing going in the temple. Yeshua at this point was just a minor annoyance, but then he did something. Mark, the 11th chapter, the 15th verse. He did something that changed the game for them. Changed the game completely. For those who like to call life a game, I tend not to do that. And they came to Jerusalem, and entering into the temple, Yeshua began to cast out those who bought and sold in the temple. And he overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves, and he would not allow any to carry a vessel through the temple. And he taught them, saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called the house of prayer for the Jews only? What? That's not what that says, is it? That's what they say, but that's not what it says here. He was already beginning to enlarge the concept to include, at least in terms of the exposure to it, not necessarily inclusion. Inclusion has to come through salvation. But the inclusion was there for, what did he say? The house of prayer for all nations. But you have made it a den of thieves. And the scribes and the chief priests heard, and they sought how they might destroy him. For they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his doctrine. Why? Because it was the truth. Still is. His doctrine was inclusive of all people. It mirrored the Torah. It spoke of a kingdom that would last forever. All seemed odd until Judas Iscariot came forth with a plan. Matthew, the 26th chapter, the 14th verse. Matthew, the 26th chapter, the 14th verse, where it says, Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests, and he said to them, What will you give me? And I will betray him to you. And they appointed to him 30 pieces of silver. And from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. And he did. And the events leading up to the martyrdom of Yeshua are well known. The whole world, depending on what day, at least they recognize this event. Don't think it's just the worst thing in the world. It's not. Because if you can get that close to the fire, you still can get warm. You can still get warm. So when that fire gets full and you now need shelter, you might see what you need and change what you're doing and do the right thing. So don't think, oh, they're all lost. Like some people think the Jews are all lost. Oh, he abandoned them. No. Ezekiel 36 proves they're not. When they talk about all those dry bones, yes. We don't have time. We almost done. 4 minutes, I'll be done. I'll be out of here. But these are the things that we need to understand. All of these people, Adam, Eve, Korah, Dathan, Judah, Caiaphas, none of them considered that their want of temporal power and authority in this life was important in the long-range plan of God. You see, God is not interested in you having power now. That's why so few of us do. He's interested in our obedience, our humility, our love, not only for ourselves, but for each other. This would have gained them so much more than this power grab. As we wind down these days of unleavened bread, it's important to remove the symbols of sin from our lives, but it is more important to leave the sin out after these days are over. The world has become more vicious, less caring, and true faith is waning. Oh yeah, 80% of U.S. citizens claim a faith in God, but, well, it's really not our place to question it. It's our place to firm up our own. Make it bulletproof. Make it hell-proof. Make it demon-proof. Make it lie-proof. Make it want power now on the earth proof. All of our senses work. Let's not waste them worrying about what somebody else might have wrong. Quit looking out the back door and leaving the front door open. This is our time to remain spiritually active. Study the Word of God. Pray for a deeper understanding of it, for the ability to use it effectively, not only in our lives, to anyone else's who will listen to us. Avoid those things, and if necessary, those people who tempt us to sin. And shine the light of God's love in the world. Goodness knows it needs it. There's nothing in this world so important that we would turn our backs on this faith to achieve it. The work that Christ began in us, he will complete it, and his kingdom will never end. And if his kingdom never ends and we're in it, guess what? Time is an illusion to you now, because it means nothing. We cannot falter in the belief that this word is true. And Yeshua will, true to his word, usher in a kingdom of love and perfection. His perfection, not our pretend perfection. Reaching out into the boundless universe. But we must remain faithful in this endeavor and remain strong in his word. Let's find his encouragement to us. Psalms, the 138th chapter, the 8th verse. Psalms, 138th chapter, the 8th verse, where it says, Yahweh will perfect his work in me. Your mercy, O Lord, O Yahweh, endures forever. Do not forsake the work of your own hand. The one you all may be more familiar with, Philippians, the 1st chapter, the 6th verse, if you flip over there. Philippians, the 1st chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, being confident of this very thing, that he who begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Yeshua Messiah. And we close out with 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, the 23rd verse, where it says, and may the God of peace himself sanctify you, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blamelessly at the coming of our Master, Yeshua Messiah. We've reached a point where we've failed in proselytizing the world. Give that up. Just keep doing what we're doing. Make sure we've got it right. If we get the opportunity to get someone one-on-one, talk to them, do it. If they start to leave it alone. Shake your feet off, move on to the next one. It's not here. I'm not here to fight. We're not here to argue. The day of arguing is over. The superior argument gives you nothing but a superior argument, of which no one will win the kingdom of God. We have to get to that point where we pray for the right thing, live what we pray for, and die for what we'll live for if it comes to that. These days of unleavened bread end tonight. Now comes the real removing of sin from our lives for the rest of those lives. Let's do that. God bless you all.